Okay. Well, thank you to the Society for allowing me this opportunity to speak on fruits in general. I'm a pomology enthusiast, horticulturalist by training. I completed my PhD in horticulture at Washington State University, June 2018. Already seems like forever, but I've been in school, 12 years, so it's all a blur. So I am now calling myself a resident of the region. I don't foresee myself leaving for a long time. I'm from San Diego, Southern California. So someone mentioned being in San Diego. I'm a little bit jealous. The one thing I can never let go of is the sun. It took me about 3 years to realize the big difference. That just, I don't know, if you in San Diego, you know what I'm talking about, but just feels like there's no brightness here. Otherwise, I like the rain. We have some rain here on occasion. I also like being able to grow a little bit more diversity of fruit crops, temperate, not so much subtropicals anymore, but I have a greenhouse at Skagit Valley College that I maintain for courses. So I'm able to grow some mangoes, chocolate, vanilla. So I think, was mentioned previously, I currently have two temporary positions, not full-time. I enjoy both very much. One position's at Washington State University at the Mount Vernon Research and Extension Center off State Route 536 in Mount Vernon. I'm researching cider apples as a postdoc. That will be coming to an end in December. Postdocs naturally are 2 to 3 years, so it's not surprising, but the health crisis definitely cemented it ending in December. So that's a little bit sad, but I also work on a contract basis at Skagit Valley College teaching horticulture courses and intro to biology courses. And those have been really exciting. It's been my first year. So I love teaching in general. Mentioned previously about an online summer course that I was hoping to offer. Unfortunately, I did not get enough students, so that actually is not a proceeding. I'm sad, but I think timing wise, it just didn't work out. From what I've learned, at least with pomology related courses, I've done workshops on pruning. Individuals need at least a couple months to plan, and this was for the summer. Now with the health crisis, maybe summer plans changed, but again, the course did not proceed. We didn't have enough students, but hopefully maybe in the fall or winter. And it's basically my idea, what I was putting together was an online 4-week course, and it was going to be focused on pomology. And then I have another 4-week course. It's still live if you get enough students, and it's growing vegetables. And so that's kind of what I do at Skagit Valley. Someone commented, I did see on the chat about vanilla, because I mentioned it. When campus opens up and we get hopefully through this health crisis eventually, there's a greenhouse there that I'd love to have people, of course, I coordinate it, but I'd love to give people tours of the greenhouse. In the last year, I've put together, I think, a really nice collection, subtropical and temperate. We also have a fruit, a hydroponic wall in there. So I'm trying to grow a couple crops hydroponically with a farm wall. So there's vertical towers, and that's kind of exciting. I've actually just received money, a scholarship for a student at Skagit Valley College from the Northwest Orchid Society to do an orchid project in the farm wall. So I'm trying to do my best to get associated and work with multiple societies. So you guys, Western Cascade Fruit Society, I'm completing a grant with. This past year, they gave me a significant amount of money to put together 3 interpretive signs. And I don't know if any of you are, I think you guys are a chapter of that, I believe, that overall society. And so I don't know if you guys are familiar with that project, but I'm just very grateful to the Western Cascade Fruit Society put together that money for me. The 3 interpretive signs are finished. They're going to go in the ground soon. I'm really excited about them. One is on grafting, and it's focused on pears, but it can apply to pears or apples. And that actually came together with collaboration with the Western Washington Fruit Research Foundation, or now known as Northwest Fruit. So that was exciting. Another sign is on pollination, and a third sign is on trees and why they're important in general. So let me don't go off too much on a tangent, but in general, I love to collaborate. I love societies such as yours. I can't believe it, but I think it's been 3 to 4 years. I presented to you guys previously on cider apples. I can't even remember the individual's name, a gentleman who allowed me the opportunity to speak to you. I came out to your location. I think it was a YMCA club, and I really enjoyed that. So it's nice to be able to come back. And so today I will be speaking on stone fruits, specifically cherries and plums, and below that, or more specifically, sweet cherries, tart cherries, and then European plums and Japanese plums. So let me proceed to the slides. So I'm just going to close out this chat. Okay, so hopefully this works. So here on the title screen, hopefully you recognize the fruit. I'm not going to talk about these delicious looking apricots, but we'll talk about these plums and cherries. The one thing I'll mention about apricots, coming from California, they're probably arguably my favorite fruit, but nothing against stores, but I do not like any fruit apricots purchased from a grocery store. I don't think the quality is anything close to off the tree. And I think that a lot of that has to do with apricots are relatively very fragile fruit. And that means if you're going to ship them any long distance or distribute them, store them for long periods of time, they have to be harvested, less ripe than what is optimal for consuming. So I think they usually harvest them too underripe. And then when they get to the store, they soften and turn to mush, but for me, the flavor's never been the same. So I would recommend, if you've never tried it before, try an apricot off the tree. Nothing beats it. Maybe a shout out to California. I think California apricots are one of the best, but I've tried some in Washington. They're very good. The one thing I'll mention for Washington, when I moved here, I planted an apricot tree. I've since ripped it out. If you've grown apricots, the number one challenge, at least on the west side, is they tend to bloom too early. And with any early frost that we experience, I think we had one this year, the frost will kill off the blooms. And so it's very hard to get a good apricot set, and let alone, I can't imagine a commercial apricot set. So I love them, they're beautiful, but I think until we're able to find cultivar that's been bred, that's really a late blooming, doesn't have that frost interaction, that would be exciting. So we'll focus on cherries and plums. If you're interested in literature, on the left, here's a nice, manual. This is Integrated Pest Management for Stone Fruits. This was produced by the UC system, so from California, focus in California, but I still think it's valuable information and photographs in it. At the same time, Washington State University has a very nice integrated pest management manual for tree fruits in general. And I believe this past year it went entirely online. So I don't even know if you can get a hard copy anymore, but there's a website, the WSU tree fruit website, and you can access that integrated pest management manual. And so that's also a very nice resource. Before my PhD, I achieved my Master's of Science at UC Davis. So that's another, I guess, part of my California bias. If you're really interested in cherries and you want to read a really nice, long, research-heavy book this summer during the health crisis, I would recommend this book on the right, Cherries, Botany, Production, and Uses. It's relatively new for a book such as this one, released in 2017. Just to give you an idea, these books take 5 to 10 years to publish. So again, I think 2017 is relatively new. And this is the first edition in this series for Cherries. It's entirely focused on research, and it is directed towards scientists. CABI International has 2 series, one for growers, one for scientists. This is the scientist series. The grower series doesn't yet have cherries. But even I think for you guys in this society, I think this is a manageable book. And I think, it just has really exciting information that you might desire to look at. Now it is relatively expensive, I think close to 100 or a little bit more than $100, but very nice photographs, and it's all evidence-based. Here's a short video. I don't know if you've seen this video before. I'm going to play it just because I think it's a nice video that's been put together by a commercial grower across the mountains. So let me play this.
My journey to being world famous starts at dawn. The glory of spring and the promise of fruit to come in 60 to 80 days on average. Pollination, green fruit to red fruit, growing in size and sweetness as the spring season carries on. Warm summer days and cool nights treat me well. When I am ready, my friends and I are harvested by hand. We are only harvested in the morning before it gets too hot. As the heat of the day progresses, I am covered with wet tarps and quickly hydro-cooled nearby to remove any heat. From here on out, I stay cold to maximize freshness and quality. On my way to packing, and again in cold water as I enter the packing line. Next, I am sized, sorted, and carefully packed, chilled, fresh, and neatly packaged. I am ready for my ultimate destination, your table, and we do it all again next year.
Okay, so that was put together, if you're familiar with the Milt, relatively large grower packer across the mountains. They have a couple nice videos, cherries, apples, etc. Hopefully there's a couple principles they're described, shown in this video that we'll hopefully touch upon. They talked about, and I think this applies whether you're commercial or even in your backyard, in terms of maintaining optimal cherry quality, plum quality. They mentioned this fruit are generally harvested in the morning. That's because the temperature is lower. What's key with fruit in general to maintain their quality is to make sure that any heat that they acquire in the field is removed, or just avoid harvesting them really at the middle of the day. So either do it early morning or do it late in the evening. Let's see, anything else? Cherries, I mentioned before, again, that contrast California, Washington. Oregon also grows cherries. Something interesting, if you've ever noticed, toward the early part of spring, when cherries come to our grocery stores, you might notice that the price seems to be relatively high compared to the middle of the season, being now. That has to do with really California hits the cherry market first. And if you know about economics, if you've grown fruit, sold it, first come to market, usually the highest priced. So California gets there first. They can charge a high amount. Think about the consumers haven't had cherries for a year. They're really excited. They're willing to pay more. Then when Washington, Oregon comes in, so right now, a couple weeks before now, the supply is larger. And so the price drops. And then what happens is toward the end of the season, in a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 more, California's gone. Prices might go up a little bit more. I've already seen they've gone up. And that's because California's gone, supply is down. And so Washington, Oregon can get their price a little bit higher. So just an interesting, if you've ever paid attention to the price, it does fluctuate. Region has a really large importance with that. So let's proceed. If you ever wonder about taxonomy, so here's a family in the plant world. Rosaceae includes not all, but a lot of our fruit crops. what we'll talk about, so here's our sweet cherries and sour cherries, 2 different species, and then I'll also talk about our plums, so Japanese, European. If I don't mention it later, we call it Japanese plum, this species, but it's actually technically from China, so it should be called China plum, even if that's not even a politically correct name, but Japanese plum is kind of a misnomer as it is. One thing, there's a slide I put together for my college students who are learning about fruit types. Cherry is a drupe. A drupe is basically a modified true berry, and what differentiates it from a blueberry, a true berry, or a tomato is that the inner tissue that surrounds the seed is hard. That's why we commonly call these stone fruits. Peaches and mangoes are also drupes. If you ever wondered about the origin of sweet cherries and tart cherries, sweet cherries are from what was previously known as Asia Minor. And so that's Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, Iran, Syria, Iraq. A long time ago, they were grown for fruit, but they're also grown for timber. They arrived in the eastern US via the English colonists, but they also came to the western US via Spanish missionaries. Tart cherries originated in northeastern Iran and Turkmenistan. The same routes of import to the US as sweet cherries. Now, one difference is sweet cherries did not expand and dominate the West as tart cherries did not expand and dominate the West as sweet cherries did, and that had to do with climate and also expense. I'll mention it later, but we'll see that tart cherries are predominantly located in Michigan, so upper Midwest, sweet cherries in Northwest. If you look at global cherry production, if you look at the leading producers, Turkey is actually, so this is as of 2012, so it's a little bit outdated, but still, I would still estimate that Turkey is still number 1, we're number 2. Iran may have fluctuated, but Turkey is a large fruit region for the world, maybe a region we don't think about, but on the global scale it is. And that's sweet cherry. Tart cherry, again Turkey, but then 2, 3, and 4 are Eastern European countries. And if you're familiar with culture in Eastern Europe, cherries found in a lot of dishes. Dumplings, breads, pastries, etc. So I'll just give you an idea. We're still in the top 20 global producers of tart cherries, but we're more dominant with sweet cherries than we are tart. I think a lot of that has to do with culture. Sweet cherries are commonly consumed in this country, while I think tart cherries here, you might find them in pies, but they're not as popular as sweet cherries. If we focus in on the United States, sweet cherries production is really Washington, California, Oregon, about 41,000 acres in production. I'll give you a relative idea of how large that is. If you're familiar with apples, about 170,000 acres are in active production in Washington state. And so think about 170,000 acres of apples in this state. And then you look at cherries, there's about 41,000 Washington, California, Oregon combined. So we have a lot of cherries, but not as much as apples. Sour cherries focused productions in Michigan, Utah, some in Washington, but really Michigan is the capital of tart cherries. And if you look at the research that's been done on tart cherries, there's some mechanical harvest work on tart cherries, that's from Michigan. And going even more, zooming in, if you're wondering about where cherries are grown in this state, you can see these colored zones. So upper Wenatchee, lower Wenatchee, Yakima, Columbia Basin, and down to the Hood River. And then Montana has a region. Idaho, around the Caldwell area, tart cherries, and around Provo in Utah, you have tart cherries. And California, anywhere from Sacramento down to Bakersfield. Michigan, if you're familiar with the counties, these are the counties highlighted in yellow and green, where pretty much the tart cherry production is concentrated. Now, what's interesting, these locations are all located close to a major lake. Why that is because the lake provides for climate moderation in the springtime. So that's important really provides for an optimal production in terms of bloom, fruit set, quality, etc. Very interesting statistics here. If you look at where do our cherries go? So cherries grown in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Montana. We consume them here, but there's also a large amount that's exported. And one of our leading countries that we export to is China. Here in 2016, a gross value of about what, $83 million. Hong Kong itself is not a country, relatively small compared to China, but you can see it has about 14 million. And so in general, if you look through this, the Asian continent, we export a lot of cherries there. I've been told when I was in Wenatchee that an individual in China could get a higher quality fruit from Wenatchee than we can across the mountains. A lot of that has to do with they pay a lot higher amount of money than we do. They can order a cherry on Monday and get it by Wednesday. And just all about, what you're willing to pay. I just think it's amazing that you can get a cherry from Wenatchee to China that fast and it maintains its high quality. And then also individual, we're just so privileged that we're located so close to the stores, but just very interesting where our fruit goes. And so, Asia, Latin America, Europe, there's some, but it's only about what, $500,000 of cherries sent to Europe. So, but they have their own sources. The other really large importer of our cherries is Canada, almost 97 million. So that's where cherries go. Here's some more visuals. These are kind of your two classic sweet and tart cherry cultivars. You have your Bing and you have your Montmorency. I believe these two are drawings from this Cherries of New York publication. I believe it's from the early 1900s. You might think that's outdated, but I still think it's a classic. Very nice hand drawings. There's a New York book on apples that I have. They're actually really, really expensive now because they're hard to get a hold of, but I think these drawings are timeless. Here's a more recent, these are photographs from the Washington State University tree fruit webpage. And so these are some more commonly known cultivars, and they're grouped on this slide, at least, according to skin color. So you have your dark reds, and these include your Bings, Lapins, Sela, Chelan, Kiona, Titan. You might recognize a lot of these names are county names, Washington, Oregon. You have your yellow, really these are red skin with yellow blushing. Well, actually, no, I apologize. It's yellow skin with red blush. And those your Rainiers. That's kind of your classic. I think it's your highest, your top dollar cherry. And then you also, what's not shown here is you have your red category. Some of the cultivars, the difference between dark red and red, it's a little bit fuzzy, the degree of difference in redness. But just giving an example, there are yellows. I've even seen at our experimental station, I think there's a cultivar known as Nugent, and it's solid yellow, but I've never seen it at the grocery store. Also, I've noticed that from my experience, at least the grocery stores I go to, you purchase red cherries. Sometimes they have a cultivar name such as Bing or Rainier. I think Rainier is that's a name that's used for marketing, but most of the time I don't see these other. I'll just see them as red cherries. And why I mention that is it's interesting. Some fruit you might be familiar with, such as peaches and nectarines, they're not sold by the cultivar name. You purchase yellow peaches or white peaches. Grapes, you purchase green grapes, red grapes. Versus apples, you purchase it by the cultivar name. So I just think it's interesting. has to do with marketing to the consumer, what the consumer likes, but just comparing, contrasting what we're familiar with different fruit types. I guess as a pomologist and a researcher, I wish we all recognize every fruit by the cultivar name, but that's just a bias on my part. If you look at soils and climate, so what's the optimum soil for your cherries, sweet and tart? Well-drained, sand dominant, pH of 6 to 6.5. Now I'll give admit that really any fruit tree desires well-drained soil. I haven't come across a fruit tree that likes to have its roots sitting in water. They don't like to be flooded. Cherries, if anything, like a little bit more sand dominance. They'd rather be on the dry side than wet side. And they preferably are grown in a temperate zone. Sweet cherries, you really want to have low rainfall, if not zero rainfall, and you want to have low humidity close to harvest. That reduces pressure, disease pressure, and cracking. So if you have a high rainfall right before harvest, what can happen is it causes the fruit to crack. I've noticed that with Rainiers on the west side. We've had Rainiers grown at the experimental station, and I'll mention it later, a cherry report that we released. But in our cherry report, we mentioned that Rainier is not so much of a cultivar that we recommend for the west side. I know it's a cultivar, I believe, that you can purchase at Home Depot or Lowe's, because I think that's because at the market, that's what consumers are after. But nothing against Home Depot, Lowe's, but I don't know if they've really done their market research in terms of how that cultivar does here. But from what I've seen at this experimental station in Mount Vernon, there are different microclimates in the west side, so it's hard to generalize for the whole west side. But if you have a lot of rainfall right before harvest, the Rainier tends to exhibit a lot of cracking. Now, I think as individuals in the fruit society, you have maybe more understanding of fruit than your average consumer, and maybe you have a higher tolerance for cracking, and so this may not be a big issue for you. But if you think of the average consumer, you think about maybe a business perspective, consumers do not want cracked cherries. Growers, distributors don't want to be selling cracked cherries because those are wounds that disease and pests could get into. But that's just something to mention. Tart cherries, they generally do better in a cooler, humid region. And so that's why they've really done well in Michigan, the Midwest, and not so well here in the Northwest. Although you can grow Montmorency very well here on the west side. One thing you'll notice, last I went over the mountains, Wenatchee, the cherry trees over there, sweet cherries are grown. They're relatively large trees. They're freestanding, although there is a shift, in Central Washington and the Hood River of Oregon. There's a shift to growing cherries more high density, so more cherries in a smaller amount of space, and trellised rather than freestanding. But that, I've been told, has taken some time because, if a grower is successful, what they're doing, why change? So it's a little bit of resistance. They're, successful what they're doing, but we're seeing more and more a change to that. But I think, if anything, my point is that if you went over to Wenatchee, a lot of the apple orchards are now high density fruiting walls, while the cherry orchards are still relatively large freestanding trees that take up a lot of space. Less trees per acre. One thing that I'll mention, I'm going to assume you guys are familiar with chilling requirement. There's a number of hours below a threshold temperature that a tree must be exposed to overcome dormancy. Oh, so I apologize. I think there we go. Oh, my slides are playing on. Okay. I really usually have this slide for college students to learn about chilling requirement. I haven't come across a cultivar that I've had issues with chilling requirement in this region. So it's not something that I'm really going to go into, but just maybe if I was speaking to someone in San Diego where they don't get enough cold chilling hours, it might be an issue. Here are two nice diagrams, collections of photographs On the left is sweet cherries, on the right is tart cherries. And it's basically photographs from dormancy, and it's focusing on these fruiting buds. So from dormancy all the way to fruit set. And researchers and also growers monitor this, I believe, for monitoring pest issues, possibly. And basically, there are different stages and looking at basically the buds waking up. And so you have dormant, you have a swollen bud, bud burst, early white bud, bloom, petal fall, fruit set. So that's sweet cherry. You can compare it to tart cherry. They're relatively similar looking. Again, why this might be important is different pest control strategies, maybe some chemicals that you might be applying for different reasons. They might be based on the stage of bloom, bud opening. And so if you're able to reference these diagrams and these different stages, that helps you understand where your sweet cherry or tart cherry is at. So I don't know, maybe a spray isn't recommended after bud burst. Then really you want to look at your cherry tree and are the buds either at dormancy or swollen bud stage. If they're past that, then you're past swollen bud stage is third stage, and you don't want to apply that spray. That's all theoretical, but just kind of give you an idea of why this might be valuable. Rootstocks. Sweet and tart cherries can be grafted onto the same rootstock. Sweet cherries have traditionally been grown on mazzard rootstocks. Tart cherries traditionally grafted on Mahaleb rootstock. What I've seen is that sweet cherries are increasingly planted on dwarfing rootstocks from the German series known as Gisela. These, what is it? I believe a patented series. So you have to pay a little bit more because the growers and everyone down the line have to pay a little bit more to be able to use this material. But what are you paying for? The benefit is that this rootstock series provides significant dwarfing effect compared to the traditional standards. There's still not same dwarfing effect as the rootstocks for apple trees. So you can have an apple tree now I saw this year for the first time, they sold at Home Depot an apple tree that you can have on your patio that only gets 2 feet tall. I thought that was pretty shocking. But you're not going to see a lot of cherries. You can see here, this Gisela 5 rootstock will get you about the height. The total tree height will be 45% that of the same scion planted on a seedling rootstock. So if you took a seed, random cherry seed, put it in the ground, grew up that tree, and then grafted a Rainier onto it, so a scion onto rootstock, that tree might be 30 feet tall. If you instead use this Gisela 5 rootstock, you'd get 45% the height. So what is that? About 12 feet tall. So that's still not close to our true dwarfing apple rootstock size, but it's definitely better than the 20-foot, maybe mazzard rootstock sweet cherries. So just gives you an idea. I think there's still work to be done on providing more dwarfing rootstocks for sweet cherries, although we're still in a better position than we are for pears, where we don't even have a rootstock for pears that's of pear material. If you're familiar with pears, we graft pears onto quince. What other? Hawthorn. But we've really still researching, being able to find for at least our climate and to have the dwarfing effect a pear rootstock. Training and pruning. Now, let's see. If I were to tell you the top 3 questions I get as a pomologist, the number one question is, what's the number one cherry I should grow? What's the number one apple cultivar I should grow? The second question is probably, what is the number one training system I should use? And the third question is, what's the best way to prune? All 3 of those questions I had when I was going through training, and all 3 questions after all my training are questions that I realized there is no specific one answer for each fruit type for every person. There is not one cherry that I tell everyone to grow. There's not one training system that I tell everyone to grow. And with pruning, there's principles, but really pruning and grafting, it's all about experience. I've done 4 years of education on grafting, but maybe 3 years of actual experience. And so I wouldn't consider myself an expert in grafting and pruning. It's just really, you need a lot of experience. Training, there's so many training systems for sweet cherries, tart cherries, apples, pears. Now there's definitely training systems that can lead you to failure. There's training systems that you'll be successful with. I'll go over some for sweet cherries, tart cherries, and plums. But really at the end of the day, you have to think about what is your goal in terms of production? Are you doing it for profit? Are you doing it for the backyard? Are you willing to climb up a ladder? What are your thoughts about spraying, etc.? So you really have to think about what's your specific goal. So for sweet cherries in general, a central or modified central leader training system is common. What I can give you, I should have had a visual, but think about a Christmas tree. So basically a similar structure to a Christmas tree. So if you're familiar with that. But you can also, I've seen sweet cherries that are grown as an open face. So that's basically the center of the tree is kind of empty, and you have all of your branches and fruit kind of on the peripheral. The idea with that is that you maximize sunlight penetration. So instead of having the center be very shaded, you have it be opened, and so sunlight can distribute more uniformly through that tree. Also, if you have fruit toward the periphery of the tree, it's, you spend less time trying to get into the middle of the tree. Also, if you're trying to spray, you don't have to worry about getting your spray effectively getting to that center of the tree. But from what I've seen in a commercial setting, a central leader is more common. Again, high density is becoming more popular, just finding that you get more yield. If you think about it, a fruiting wall, basically kind of a hedge. The advantages, I think I'll have a photograph later. The advantage of a fruiting wall is that basically you have this wall with really two planes. So, how can I think of it? Maybe if you have a fence in your backyard, you have the side of the fence that you face, and then maybe the side of the fence that your neighbor faces. So you only have two planes, and the width of that plane is maybe, maybe 1 foot maximum. So if you think about it, all of that fruit is reachable. You're not really having to stick your hand into a dense tree. All of that fruit's relatively accessible for spraying. It's relatively accessible for pruning, for thinning. And you can have your rows spaced relatively close to each other. So you can get more trees in X amount of acres. And so we're just seeing in general higher density. Traditionally, sweet cherry trees are minimally pruned, and they're predominantly long-lived. And that means in a commercial setting, you can get, for 10 to 12 years, you can get a good commercial crop off a sweet cherry tree. Tart cherries are a whole nother game. And this is focused though on commercial setting. So tart cherries are spaced very closer together. They are grown on a also modified central leader, but they're generally grown freestanding. And this all has to do with tart cherries are mechanically harvested. They are not hand harvested like sweet cherries. Sweet cherries, machines are not yet effective because sweet cherries, it's all about a perfect looking fruit. And with the machines we have now, they'll beat those sweet cherries up. You're not gonna be able to sell any perfect looking fruit. Versus tart cherries, we're not looking for perfect looking fruit. A lot of them go into drinks, a lot of them go into pies. So they can get damaged. They're usually processed fast. So we're not too worried about wounds getting rotted, etc. So the tart cherry, the whole orchard's basically designed with the machine, the shake and catch machine in mind. They are pruned more than sweet cherries because they generally bear their fruit on shoots more than they do on spurs. Spurs, if you're not familiar, basically this wood, it's relatively, looks kind of like stubby. It's very condensed. It doesn't grow out much, and it can bear fruit, 3 to 5 years, unlike a shoot. Spurs are pretty dominant with apple trees, pear trees. So some differences in training and pruning sweet cherries and tart cherries. Again, you'll generally prune your tart cherries more than your sweet cherries. Here's just some more photographs. Sweet cherries again. Let's see what I had there. Sweet cherries you'll find on shoots, and you'll also find them on spurs. So here's a spur. Again, comparing what's a spur versus shoot. Shoots can get pretty long, 1 to 3 feet. Spurs are wood that don't, they grow what, an inch or two a year, and they're generally associated with fruit. And so here we see sweet cherries, spurs and shoots versus tart cherries. They're predominantly grown, they grow off a shoot. So yeah. Look at pollination, something important that we may not always think about. Sweet cherries, cross-pollination is required. Self-incompatibility is pretty dominant with the various sweet cherry cultivars. So what does this mean? You generally should have, at least for a commercial operation, at least 2 sweet cherry cultivars in production. Yes, almost with any fruit tree, you can have 1 in your backyard and get some fruit. But if you really want a good set, and especially if you're going to go into selling the fruit, sweet cherries are one of those that you should have at least 2 cultivars, because cross-pollination provides for that good solid set. On a commercial setting, they've optimized it such that the pollinizer, that's the source of pollen. Pollinator is your agent of pollen transfer, so your bee or you with a Q-tip. Your pollinizer, pollen source, is usually planted every 3rd tree, every 3rd row. So you think about it, in a commercial setting, they want almost every tree out there to be providing them fruit that they can harvest and sell. And they want very few trees whose sole purpose is just to provide pollen. They need them there, but they don't want to have too many because they're not going to harvest the fruit from them. And they're taking up, basically acreage. Now, of course, for your backyard, you're not probably dealing with acreage. So for you, it's probably just enough to have 1 pollinizer, and that's it. One other thing I'll mention, something that's popular with backyard are your fruit basket trees, or what's another name? I've seen fruit basket, fruit collection. Basically a tree that you have multiple, let's say stone fruits on, or multiple of the same species. So I've seen a fruit basket which is like 5 different cherry cultivars. So you can purchase 1 cherry tree, but it has 5 different scions on it. You relatively pay a lot more. I would recommend, if you have the grafting experience and skills, it's a lot less expensive to create your own multi-scion tree, put your own cherry cultivars onto a rootstock. You are paying, I've seen $70 to $100 for a tree that has 5 different sweet cherries on it. Another thing I would just say from my observations, I'm not too fond of these fruit baskets having 5 sweet cherry cultivars on 1 rootstock, or even having an apricot, a plum, and a cherry on 1 rootstock. Why that is because at the end of the day, you have to think about every branch, every fruit. They're all competing for X resources, limited resources. Trees are not like humans. They cannot gorge on resources. There is no such thing as an obese fruit tree. And so they're competing for what limited resources the tree has. So from my perspective, if I purchased a fruit basket before where I had 1 rootstock and I had a peach, plum, and cherry, and my plum branch was very dominant, but my apricot and cherry never really did well any year. That's because that plum was just the best competitor. It took up the nutrients the best, also probably did the best with my climate, etc. But you just have to realize it's a novelty. It's nice to have. If you have very limited space, maybe you only have a couple hundred square feet, that fruit basket's enticing. But if anything, I would rather have separate trees that are, a plum, apricot, and a cherry. A tart cherry, they're mostly self-fertile. So that's the difference between sweet cherries. Tart cherries, you can really have 1 cultivar and get a really good commercial set. They're unique really among the fruit trees in general, in that they're mostly self-fertile. Really, most of our fruit trees, temperate ones, you need cross-pollination for a good set. Tart cherries do have a higher chilling requirement than sweet cherries, generally around 1600 hours. And so again, that goes back to why they do really well in Michigan and the regions that we saw in Michigan. They're early maturing, about 60 to 90 days from bloom to harvest. They are the latest stone fruit to bloom, the tart cherries, but that's actually an advantage. That's something I'd like to see with apricots. Being a late bloomer means that you are less susceptible to frost damage and losing your entire crop. So if somehow they're able to breed an apricot with a tart cherry, that might be interesting. Another slide that I'll really briefly go over, but stone fruit, such as cherries, when they grow, they actually have 3 phases of growth, unlike your apples and pears. Apples and pears have 2 stages, and that's really cells divide, and then the cells expand, and you get your volume of your fruit. Stone fruit have a 3rd phase, and that's in the middle. That's their pit hardening. They have pits, unlike apples and pears. And so in the middle of their growth, in the middle of that 60 to 90 day period, they have I think it's a week to 2 weeks where all the energy is focused on that pit hardening and formining. So just if you're interested. So pests and diseases, probably a topic a couple of you are interested in. I think there was a chat question on spotted wing Drosophila. I put together this slide focusing on some of the more common pests and diseases in the west side. These don't cover all of them. Now, I like to differentiate my direct and indirect pest and disease types. So when we talked about direct pests and direct diseases, we're talking about something that affects the fruit tissue. Versus if we're talking about indirect pests and disease damage, we're talking about not affecting the fruit, but affecting a tree organ, such as wood, leaf, roots. And then if you go more specific, with direct damage, you have cosmetic damage. And some of the common cosmetic issues for cherry, sweet, and tart in this side of the mountains is brown rot, plum curculio, powdery mildew, and then birds. Birds, we have a big issue at the extension center. We do have a net, but it takes a lot of labor to put that net up, and so we don't do it. We don't currently have research money for cherries, sadly. At least we have the block, but we don't have the net. I would recommend, in your backyard, I think it's probably manageable to be able to put up a net. I think it's a really good recommendation if you have a lot of crows. The crows just devastate our sweet cherries at the center. And really, I would, birds I put as cosmetic, but they do more than cosmetic. What really frustrates me is that a lot of them just peck the fruit and don't even eat the whole thing. So I would count birds as cosmetic and internal. But internal damage, so cherry fruit fly, oriental fruit moth, plum curculio, and then spotted wing Drosophila. I am not an entomologist or pathologist by training. So I did see a question on spotted wing Drosophila. I know it is an issue with cherries, and I think it has to do why it's an issue with what, like blueberries, cherries, certain fruit and not others, has to do with the skin thickness and penetrability of those fruits. Now, in terms of management, I would ask, I think someone already did, so I'll get your information. Let me know what your questions are, and I work very closely with the entomologist at the Research and Extension Center, Bev Gerdeman. I can get your questions to her directly and get back to you with a response. So just put them in the chat, and I will ask her about that. But otherwise, I don't really want to speculate too much. Let's see. Indirect issues. So things that might, decrease photosynthesis, energy accumulation, really what we think about sugars. Black cherry aphid can be an issue. Wood loss, bacterial canker can be an issue. At the Extension Center, we have I think it's a tart cultivar known as Surefire. It's a beautiful tree, but I've yet to get a good crop off it because every year the bark is entirely black and it has a bunch, what to me, I've yet to get it tested, but it looks like it has a bad case of bacterial canker. And I can tell you it affects the yield and fruit quality of that tree, aside from the tree just looking terrible like it's been burned. Perennial canker, viruses can be an issue. And then in terms of root function, armillaria, root rot, and nematodes can be an issue. I'll note the one thing I will comment, and this, think about stone fruit in general, if you think about peaches and leaf curl. If you're going, some of these issues, you have to consider chemicals. They may not be organically approved, but have to deal with the tools that we have. Some of these chemicals, timing is very critical. So I know something like peaches and peach leaf curl, it's all about applying it, I believe it's the early winter. By the time you see the symptom, leaf curling, it's too late to apply the spray. You've lost it for the season. So just something to realize, timing is of the essence with fruits. I tell my students, if you might grow fruit trees in the backyard, it might be a hobby, but it's a hobby that you better be passionate about, because I find myself active every month. It's not something that you're just active 3 months of the year. And so timing is just very important. I'm either pruning, grafting, harvesting, monitoring fruit quality. There's always something to do. And then again, if you have a pest or disease issue specific, please let me know and I will get you a response. Here are some photographs just for reference. This is from that integrated pest management manual from the UC system. Just give you, some visuals of what I mentioned. Here's your black cherry aphids. Here are some San Jose scales, curling of leaves due to the black cherry aphid, cherry maggots. I will mention at the Extension Center, every year we have a high incidence of, it's either cherry maggot or probably spotted wing Drosophila. In the end, we just call it extra protein. We eat the fruit. But I know, you could not sell that fruit in a commercial setting, and, some backyard growers might be uncomfortable with it. So you need to make sure to manage these pests properly. I don't know if I've seen recently, what I've seen going around is strawberries, individuals putting strawberries in, hot water, and they see these, I can't remember what it was, but some insect coming out. I wouldn't be too freaked out about that. I think just being aware what you're purchasing, knowing how to handle the fruit. And again, I don't know, for me in the end, it's protein. I'd rather not have it in the cherry, but if it's in my backyard, I probably would still eat it. Bird damage, probably have seen it. For me, it always looks like this. They don't take the whole fruit, they damage half of it, and it just browns and rots away. And my takeaway for the college students is just realizing we're usually humocentric. We always think about us and that's it. We're the only things in the world, but we're not the only ones who are interested in this juicy looking red fruit. There's numerous, your deer, birds, I've seen squirrels. And so you have to just think about, if you have those pressures, how to manage them. If you thought about how do growers gauge when to harvest sweet cherries, it's a couple metrics, but the dominant ones, color is a really important metric for determining when they harvest sweet cherries. And so here's a nice compilation of photographs looking at a cherry from, very yellow. It's not a cultivar that's going to end up being yellow. It's going to end up being dark red. But early on, it's yellow, transitions to orange, red, and then this dark purple. And so growers, they will, depending on how far their fruit will go, how long it'll be stored, they're probably going to harvest it at one of these two colors. How do they consistently harvest it at one of those two colors? They usually have some kind of looks like a paint swab, what's it called? Paint swab, or I'm forgetting the terminology, but if you go to IKEA or Lowe's and you need a paint sample, they have those paint reference, I don't know, paint stick, I don't know, I'm forgetting, but they have a piece of paper that has the color, and they basically can put the cherry, a random sample of cherry. They don't obviously harvest a ton of them, but a random sample from a couple trees, put them into these references and see where the color lines up. Another very important metric is size. In general, almost with any fruit, the larger the fruit, the higher the price you can get. And also, you think about it, we shop with our eyes. We do shop in terms of taste when we come back to purchase a fruit, but when we first, in the beginning of the season, or your first time purchasing a new fruit, new cultivar, it's all about how it looks, and size is huge. And so you can see how they consistently measure size. Here's another nice device with these pre-sized holes, and they're millimeters. And generally, I believe the minimum diameter for sweet cherries is 21 millimeters. These aren't, photograph isn't to scale, but this one's 28 and this one's 30. This one's 30 millimeters. We generally want to get a lot of, a high tissue to pit ratio. So size and color, and also what I don't show here is obviously sweetness is a big thing. Interesting observation, if you've ever, at least in your backyard, noticed that you've harvested a doubled cherry fruit, so something that looks like this. A good, one of the possible explanations for this was that the previous summer, there were very high temperatures that the cherries were exposed to. And what this causes is that you have to think about cherries as one of those fruits where the fruits from this season actually first started forming the summer before. And so if you think about this season, toward the end of this summer, the fruits that are going to come next season are starting to form, the flowers initiating. And so if the flowers initiating for next year are exposed to high summer temperatures, it can actually it can affect the ovaries such that next year there's a good possibility you'll get this observation of doubled fruits. In a backyard, it might not be an issue, but for commercial grow, it's an issue, because if those fruits get separated, this is what they usually look like. And you can see that, this looks like this pit's coming out. It does not look like the typical sweet cherry should look. It looks like there's already some decay on it. So just something interesting to think about, why does this happen? Sweet cherries, again, are predominantly, how am I doing time? I just want to make sure, am I going too long? Okay, I'll pick it up a little bit. So sweet cherries are hand harvested. Sweet cherries are destined for the fresh market. And so like dessert apples, like Japanese plums, apricots, European pears, all of those are fresh market usually, and so they're all hand harvested. A lot of care needs to go into them so that the consumer gets a high quality fruit. The consumer could be marketed a low quality fruit, but they're not going to purchase it. Machine harvesting, though, is used for tart cherries. And so here's some nice photographs. I talked about a shake and catch machine is used. Here's the arm of that shake and catch. If you ever seen similar equipment for olives and nuts in California, basically you have this large machine, this kind of looking like a tractor over here, but it has an arm. The arm extends, hand basically grasps the trunk of the tree, then shakes it, and you can see this tarp is put out. All of those tart cherries are then dropped onto the tarp, and then that tarp looks like lifted, and water is sprayed onto it, and all those tart cherries are collected into this conveyor, which then gets conveyed into this bin. And obviously, there's probably a good amount of some damage to these, but these are going to be processed. They're not going to go next to your Honeycrisp, and so it's an entirely different market. One thing that's interesting, maybe if you have access to, so ethifon or ethylene, the ripening hormone, if some of you had access to it, might experiment with it yourself, pursuant to the label. What's interesting is they're researching if you spray ethylene 2 weeks prior to harvest, that can help loosen the fruit. Why is that desirable for tart cherries? Because that maximizes the amount of fruit that this machine is able to shake off the tree. If you imagine, these machines are really expensive. If you're gonna go in there and shake that tree, you wanna do it one time, that's it. You wanna go on to the next tree, you wanna get 100% of that fruit off. And so they found that applying ethylene, this hormone, to the tree 2 weeks prior to harvest really ensures that the fruit are weakly attached to the tree and will easily be knocked off. Closing for the sweet cherries and tart cherries part of this presentation. At the Extension Center, we did just release a final report for our 3-year trial of sweet cherry cultivars. This is available at this link, extension.wsu.edu/maritime fruit/tree-fruit/reports. You can see it. And it goes over, we evaluated 11 sweet cherry cultivars that had not been tested in our general cool maritime climate of Western Washington. We evaluated them since, 2014, when they went in the ground. And in the end, we collected at least 3 years of data on 9 of the 11 trial cultivars. For reference, we also collected data on 2 commercial standards. 2 years of data on 4 commercial standards. Those are Bing, Lapins, Rainier, and White Gold. Probably more familiar with Bing and Rainier. We don't see Lapins and White Gold too much anymore. If you have time, look over the report. We have some, let's see, final recommendations. Here's a table in the report. It gives you, results for different characteristics that we looked at for the sweet cherries. So we looked at skin color. Is it a red, dark red? Is it a blush? So this is yellow with red blush. Market category, is this for the sweet or the tart market? Again, they're pretty much all self-fertile, but there are some that aren't. Harvest date, if you're familiar with sweet cherries, the commercial growers, they reference everything to being. When is being harvested? That's what the reference point is. So you'll notice that we also provide the date. So if one cultivar we tried was Benton for 3 years, and on average was harvested on June 28th, which was about 5 days before being. So just interested if you're wondering about that. Looked at diameter, SSC. This is a measurement of sugar. And then we also looked at skin color. Not going to go into that because that still needs some more research data to be collected. And then we had field notes. So I'll go down to Rainier, one of the commercial standards. So our field notes for 3 years running, significant fruit rot and cracking. So some of you might have success. We have different microclimates on this side, but if I were to go to a nursery, I would not purchase Rainier for these reasons. Now I say that and I have 2 Rainiers in my backyard and they do pretty good. But if I had to spend X dollars and only could plant 2 trees, in hindsight, I wouldn't have chose Rainier. What I would choose is, let me see, this is our recommendation paragraph in the report. But let me find, so 3 cultivars did best, Cowwitch, Early Robin, and Glacier. I've been told that Early Robin so that's a yellow, what is it? A yellow skinned with red blush, looks identical to Rainier. I found if anything it's bigger. I actually like it personally better than Rainier. I've been told that some of the Rainier-like cherries that you purchase at the store are actually Early Robins. And so I would recommend, if you're interested in a yellow skin with red blush sweet cherry, if you have access to Early Robin, plant that one. Cowwitch and Glacier are your red and dark reds. Relatively large sized. An advantage of Glacier to Cowwitch is that Glacier is self-fertile. Cowwitch is one of those unique ones that's not. So you're going to need at least another cultivar besides Cowwitch if you're going to plant it. And And as I mentioned, early Robin produced similar, if not better, yellow with red blush fruit than Rainier, and slightly sweeter, but most promising. I did not find cracking with the early Robin as I did the Rainier. So if I was in Central Washington, I'd probably plant Rainier. Western Washington, I'd go with early Robin if I really was after the yellow, red blushed sweet cherry. Let's see. Now, just again, thinking about differences, Eastern Washington, although really means Central, Wenatchee, early Robin was found to have low fruit set there, and doubling of fruit was found. So again, it's all about where you're located, what's your climate, but for our Western Washington in general, I really liked early Robin. And here's some photographs that we have in the report, just comparing what these different trial cultivars are like. Now, I have talked with we have a new stone fruit breeder, Dr. Per McCord, and he has new, they always have new varietals in their program, and there's some new ones coming out. And so these, the ones that we trialed are already out there. You can access them, so that's exciting. But if you think about what's the, latest in the pipeline, there's a couple that we've yet to get access to, but they're quite interesting. There's one that was that didn't make it in the program for Central Washington, but has been suggested they might try it on this side. Might be promising for home gardeners because it actually ripens over a longer period. What that means is you can get multiple harvests over it, multiple harvests from it, which is desirable for, I think, for a backyard gardener. If you're a commercial grower, you generally want one harvest, but a backyard grower, it'd be nice to have a couple harvests. So just something. And that's it for sweet cherry and tart cherry. So let's proceed then with European plum and Japanese plum. Again, what really should be called Chinese plum, but we know it as European and Japanese. So some off the bat differences. European and Japanese are two different species. So Prunus domestica, Prunus salicina. Europeans, there are some that are used for fresh market, but most European plums are for pruning. And I will discuss why I said they're for pruning and not they are prunes, because there's really no, prunes are not their own species. I'll just get into it now. Prunes are plum cultivars that have a very high amount of sugars, such that the high amount of sugar basically inhibits bacterial growth. So you can dry them on the tree or harvest them and dry them out on your shelf, and those fruit will transition from, plump, high water content fruit to very dry plums. Japanese plums relatively have a low amount of sugar, and so if you just left them on the tree or you left them on your shelf, they'll generally rot before they ever shrivel and give you a prune. So just giving you that, I guess, interesting tidbit. Not their own species, they're just a cultivar. Generally, European plums that have a high enough sugar that you can basically dry them before they rot. European plums are generally more cold hardy. They bloom later. And they're also usually European plums, they have an oblong shape. Japanese plums, usually globose or like a globe, they're very round. Japanese plums are usually for fresh consumption, fresh market, not pruned. They are less cold hardy, and they generally bloom earlier, and they bloom a ton. So these, I don't know if too many people do thin the flowers or fruits of Japanese plums, but these are one of the plums that you should thin, because they really bloom too much. They'll put on more fruit than they should. And so here are some nice photographs. Again, your European types for pruning, your Japanese types, you can see, on a plate for, some kids' lunch. Basically, fresh market versus processing market. And so again, here's European, don't know what cultivar, but European plum. Here's a Japanese plum. And then this one's actually, is a pruning plum. It's a, what is it, green gauge, I believe. It is harvested green. I've actually seen that Home Depot recently. So that's a pruning type. Here's again the classification. Prunus salicina, Prunus domestica. One thing I'll mention is, since they are all, at least, they're in the same genus, you can create a tree where you have one rootstock and you have peach, apricot, sweet cherry, and a sour cherry all in one rootstock. You could not put an apple or pear on a apricot rootstock, and you cannot put an apricot onto a blackberry rootstock. But these are in the same genus, and so you can do a whole mix between them. You could do almonds and cherries, plums and cherries, etc. Look at origin. European plums originate in Western Asia near the Caspian Sea, so Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Russia. If you're familiar, apples came from Kazakhstan. European plum arrived in Eastern US via English colonists, and like sweet cherries, they came to Western US via Spanish missionaries. European plums were mostly sold for prunes or prune juice, as they are today. Japanese plums originated in China thousands of years ago. They were only brought to Japan a couple hundred years ago, but we know them now as Japanese plums. I think a lot of that has to do with it. In Japan, they're more heavily domesticated and what we're familiar with. They're mostly sold for raw consumption. Give you a again, looking at this map. So Prunus domestica, domesticated over here, or originated here, Prunus salicina down here. Quite far apart. Plum, it's a drupe, like a peach and a mango. Look at global production. China is the leading global producer of plums. If you've studied various fruit types, China is, really the leading producer of it's more unique to not find China as the leading producer of a fruit. The United States is the second leading producer, and then you see two Eastern European, Serbia, Romania, and then down to Italy, number 10. So those are global top producers. We look at US specifically, it's all about California. Your plums and prunes come from California. Some in Oregon, Washington, less than 1% Michigan, Idaho. Soils and climate, again, if you have an ideal soil, well drained, sand dominant, pH about 5.8 to 6.5. They're a temperate zone crop. Japanese, again, require a lower chill hour requirement than European plums. But what does that mean? What you should focus on? We can grow both Japanese and European plums here, but if you have a crop that's a lower chill requirement, that means it's going to be more susceptible to frost damage than your European plum. They perform better with low rainfall, low humidity. So Japanese plums do better in our southern climates. Not to say you can't grow them well here. And then here is a diagram, again, looking at plums and prunes, again, because they're the same species. And this is actually for Japanese and European, the different bud stages. Rootstocks, there are multiple rootstocks. Now, what I forgot to mention with sweet cherries, tart cherries, often when we purchase fruit trees, we focus only on the scion. We talk about, I'm going to the nursery and I want Honeycrisp, I want Rainier, I want Orcas. But really, I would argue that you really should be selecting also for your rootstock. It's harder to be able to select for that because, think about a nursery, they only have so much space, so it's hard to do the 10 rootstocks and 10 scion and then 100 combinations between those. So they generally carry maybe 2 rootstocks and then 10 scions for those 2 rootstocks. But I would argue that if you have the time and the patience, research the rootstock that you want and find that one. Because at the end of the day, the rootstock is what goes into the ground, and it's a lot harder to make a change to the rootstock once it's in the ground than it is to make a change to the scion. We can easily cut the top of the tree off and replace the top, but you really can't, cut off the top and put it onto a new rootstock. You lose that whole canopy. So think about it before you put it into the ground and make that investment. Now, if you look at what are the different rootstocks for plums, citation, pretty common, Mariana, your myrabolins. And this table is just comparing what are different characteristics. Now, there is no perfect rootstock for apples, pears, cherries, etc. You're not going to get a rootstock that has perfect score for every characteristic. And so you need to think about maybe what are your top 3 issues for your, what's the top disease, what's the top climate issue, etc., and select for those factors. And so you can see the different rootstocks, they differ in their suitability for wet soil, dry soil, a basic soil, nematode issues, root rot issues, etc. And then here's some very nice comments. So citation, that's actually a semi-dwarfing, it's a peach plum hybrid, and it's the most common rootstock for new Japanese plum plantings in California. I mentioned California because that's the commercial capital. Training, again, at the end of the day, your decision, what's best for you. But European plums are generally produced on a commercial scale as large freestanding trees. So a low density, relatively low amount of trees per acre. And from what I've seen, they're generally European and Japanese are trained to open centers. I see that also with peaches and nectarines. So generally, if you were to look, the best photograph would be something from top down, so a satellite photograph. If you look at the center of these trees, it's empty, and basically you have this vase shape. So the rim of the vase, the periphery is where all your branches and fruit are, and that's all about getting that sunlight into the center and distributed outward. So open centers, large trees. Just see. So the left photograph is an open center system, Japanese plum, full bloom. Again, Japanese plum, one of the most heavy bloom set of all the fruits out there. Quite beautiful. And then here on the right, it's a prune orchard in California, also trained to open center. And something interesting, we'll talk about prunes mechanically harvested. And so this orchard is designed for the mechanical harvester to come through it. I will, let me see. I'm going to skip this video for time. This is a video on mechanical harvesting for prunes. Look at pollination. So in general, about 4 years to reach max production. So a good, good commercial set, European, Japanese. So jumping ahead, but we'll get back to pollination. Fruit generally on spurs, wood that is 2 years and older, and axillary buds that are 1 year wood. So you can see here, you can't see the spurs, but there's a couple spurs in there, tons of flowers. European cultivars, about half of them require cross-pollination. The other half, which are generally your prunes, do not require cross-pollination, so they're self-fertile. So with your prunes, you generally only need to plant 1 cultivar. They're generally less precocious, relatively, especially relative to Japanese. And so I rarely hear or see individuals thinning European plums. Japanese, some cultivars require cross-pollination, but most are self-fertile. They are the heaviest, of all the stone fruits, they should undergo the heaviest thinning. Some can produce over 100,000 flowers per tree. And here's some nice photographs. So let's see, before thinning on the left, after thinning on the right. You can just see how many fruit they removed. You might wonder, why do you want to do this? You're just getting rid of fruit that I can bite into. One, if this is a horizontal branch and it has all these fruits, you could snap that branch, you lose that, you think about real estate, all that wood that could have fruit on it, all that time they went into building, they went into that branch being built. So you can get wood damage. Also, going back to competition for energy, if you think about it, for my students, I like to talk about, if you have one child versus, I don't know, 5 kids, you have $100,000 for education, you can do a lot more, you can put a lot more money into the education of one student than 10. Same thing with these fruit. If you have 100 fruit with X carbohydrates versus 5 fruit, you undoubtedly are going to get larger, higher quality fruit when you have less. Because again, there's not an unlimited amount of sugars that this plum tree can acquire and produce, equals large size fruit. So, and in a backyard setting, you might think about, only have two trees. Maybe you're not too worried about it, but maybe I would argue you've yet to taste the best fruit that you can achieve and the largest fruit you can achieve, maybe because you're not thinning your Japanese plums. So something you might consider doing. Pests and diseases, again, I've broken it down direct and indirect. In the direct, so the cosmetic issues, aphids, bacterial spot, plum pox virus, again, plum curculio. Plum curculio can be an issue with almost any stone fruit. Powdery mildew, scale, thrips, internal damage. I've seen cherry fruit fly, oriental fruit moth. I have not seen spotted wing Drosophila, and I think that has to do with a thicker, less penetrable skin that the spotted wing Drosophila can't get into. So I guess that's a positive. Indirect, pretty similar to your cherries. So bacterial spot, black knot. So that actually is something at the Extension Center. Again, we don't have research money, so we're not spraying our plums, and that's actually been a big issue. We've seen a high amount of black knot in our plums, and it's taken a couple years to kill off the trees, but this year we cut down, I think it was at least 6 large trees. They've been there maybe at least 20 years. They were just entirely covered with these knots. And they basically just, in the end, low fruit set and can just girdle the tree and it just shuts down. So you want to avoid that. Yeah. And I think if anything, other thing I mentioned when it comes to pests, diseases, I mentioned time is important. So if you're using chemicals, make sure you're applying at the right time. Again, pursuant to the label. And also, think about it. If you're pruning, at least on a small scale backyard, I would take the time to sanitize your equipment. For commercial growers, they often don't have the time, resources to sanitize, etc. But if you think about apples, they work on cider apples, anthracnose, canker is a big issue on the west side. Sanitation, since we don't yet have a control for that disease, it's all about prevention. And so I would recommend, whatever tree you're grafting, fruit type, sanitize your pruning shears, because you possibly don't know what you're vectoring, transferring between trees. With sanitizers, as we're learning, even with the health crisis now, there's good quality hand sanitizers, there's bad quality. Generally, when you're dealing with pruning equipment, metal, I avoid your sanitizers that are heavily water-based. You don't want to rust out or damage your pruning equipment over the long term. So more of a high alcohol solution. Here are some visuals. So plum curculio. Let's see. So see, it can basically, these larvae basically eat their way out. In the end, you usually just observe these holes. Sometimes you might come across the organism inside, but usually what you'll do is you'll see the holes and you'll bite into or cut into, and you'll see some browning, maybe some leftover feces from that organism that made its way out. Here's some photographs, some black knot. Pretty easy to determine if you have black knot or not. Here's another photograph. So how to gauge when to harvest. Like cherries, sweet cherries, it's all about color. And actually, what to look for in plums, specifically ground color, or what we might call background color. So the ground or background color is really that green color that's dominant early on. And what we look for is, does that green color go away and start to give rise to yellow, a little orange? Because you can have a red, predominantly red plum, but there's a high amount of green background to it. And so they basically monitor how that ground color changes from green to orange. Now, interesting, I don't think this actually is a transition of one fruit. To me, this looks like a peach, a plum, and maybe a pluot. But you get the idea, difference in color. I'm not going to cover peaches and nectarines, but just an interesting thing. You ever wonder what's the difference between a peach and a nectarine? They're almost genetically identical. It's only one gene. Nectarines are naturally not fuzzy. Peaches are fuzzy. Now, yes, someone asked me, a master gardener asked me, well, I've purchased a peach that was not fuzzy before. They've bred peaches now to be not fuzzy. But traditionally, 9 times out of 10, when you go to purchase a nectarine or peach in the store, what differentiates them is peaches are fuzzy and nectarines are not fuzzy. So it's just something interesting. Otherwise, they're genetically and entirely identical. So ground color, size, they want big plums, and then also sugar. So you want a sweet plum. There's interspecific hybrids, and actually, so Zyger Genetics in California is one of the leading, breeders of these hybrids. If I'm not wrong, I believe, I don't remember if it's Mr. Zyger, but a key individual breeder from Zyger Genetics, I believe, just recently passed away in California. But so that they produced some pluots. Those are 75% plum, 25% apricots. Cultivar, you might be familiar with, say Dapple Dandy, also known as dinosaur eggs. I think that Dapple Dandy is probably a better marketing than dinosaur egg. Plum cots, I've yet to see these, but I'm very interested. They're half plum, half apricot. And then your apriums, 75% apricot, 25% plum. The cultivar you might have seen is honey rich. So hybrids, they have desirable characteristics from the 2 species, so plum and an apricot. And then basically, you look at the percentages that each species contributing. With the pluot, you're going to get a bit more plum features than you are with in an aprium. So there's pros and cons to that, depending on what you're looking for. If you look at marketing, the crop in the US, so there's fresh market canning plums, drying plums, and freezing plums. Most of our market is for fresh. Behind that, we do canning, and then behind that is pruning, and there's a small amount that's frozen. And here's a photograph, prunes, probably a product you've seen, Sunsweet's one of the leading prune manufacturers. And I think one of the largest marketing strategies with prunes has been gearing it toward the older demographic who might be concerned with digestion, or I don't know if it's digestion, bowel movement. That's really been their big push. And but what I've seen is that they've noticed that they're trying to get more kids involved in other demographics. So I'm starting to see a shift in how prunes are marketed. One of the things I've seen is now they have single wrapped prunes. So you'll purchase a bag like this, and then within that bag, every single prune is wrapped. I think the idea with that is it's handy. You can take a single prune with you, but I'm a fruit fiend. I eat more than one prune, and I don't like the idea of that much plastic, but that's something that's been marketed out there, interesting. but that's what consumers are after. Here's some might be familiar: jams, jellies, and then here are some, fresh. Whether you just slice it open or put, a fine restaurant, you might see the photograph like this. Here I have something from the USDA. They looked at nutrition content, and it's value, dietary value per 100-gram sample of tissue. And what I just wanted to show you is, again, to get the idea across of cultivars that are for fresh market versus pruning. You can see your fresh plums, 80% water, your prunes are 31%. But more importantly, your plum cultivars for pruning have 240 calories, 46 calories for fresh plums, and then really we go down to your carbs, 64 versus 11. There's a lot more sugar, a lot less water in your plum cultivars for pruning. Your cultivars that are 87% water, relatively little bit amount of carbohydrates, these are not going to be successful. You're not going to have as good success pruning these. And it just goes back to, it goes back to before we had refrigeration and all of our modern technology. How do we preserve fruits for the long term? We either fermented them, meats and cheeses we salted, but fruits we put a lot of sugar if it wasn't already in there, or we jammed and jellied it. So that was our means of preserving. And so I put that in there. There's also some other differences. Prunes, again, they have a lot more fiber relative to your fresh plum cultivars. What's a 7-fold difference there? So again, that goes back to they're marketed for their fiber content. You wouldn't want to have a Japanese plum, even if you're able to successfully prune that Japanese plum, maybe like a Satsuma, you're going to have a very low amount of crude fiber to be providing consumers. So just something interesting. Otherwise, okay, so about 15 minutes till 9. That is all I had. Unfortunately, I forgot to take it out. No, April 29th, I'm not going to cover grafting and pruning, but maybe in the future when we're back together, I'm hoping to have grafting and pruning workshops, one-day workshops, and so I can let your society know about those if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll open it up if you guys have any questions.